They took our jobs. I don't know if you guys have been keeping up with the news or are chronically online, but there have been some major changes in the software engineering space over this weekend. The US administration made a huge change to the H-1B visa policy, and let me tell you, that caused chaos everywhere. People were freaking out online, people were freaking out at airports, people were just freaking out in general. And even worse, the administration has made this change super confusing, with few people not even knowing what actually went into place. So I'm going to tell you what change just took place, what that means for software engineers, and what the future might look like for software engineering. So this Friday, as you were diligently working on your task that your product manager said needs to go out next week, and you were definitely not preparing for the weekend, the Trump administration drops a bombshell executive order. This executive order raised the price of an H-1B visa from a few grand to 100 grand. However, the wording of this executive order was super vague. It wasn't clear when this 100 grand fee would come into play. The launch day of this fee was September 21st, 2 days after the signing of the executive order. Employers weren't sure when this fee applied. Was it when they were requesting new H-1B visas? Was it for current H-1B holders within their company? If you had left the US on vacation and you were trying to get back in, would the employer have to pay 100 grand to get you back in? And as you can realize, this caused chaos. In the San Francisco airport, some people were demanding to get off their flights. Some airplanes had gone onto the tarmac and people demanded them be let off and back into the airport.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the captain speaking. Due to the current circumstances, obviously, that are unprecedented for us here at Emirates, we are aware that a number of passengers do not wish to travel with us, and that's perfectly fine. All we ask is that if you wish to offload yourself, you do so.
Fortune, hearing about the news, started to book up all flights from India to the US so no one could fly back before the 21st deadline. Now, if you're not very familiar with the H-1B visa or how it works, you might be confused on why people are panicking. The H-1B visa is a visa for high-skilled jobs. It's supposed to be used by employers for when they can't find someone in the US skilled enough to do a specific job they're looking for. And let me just tell you, it's used heavily for software engineers. There's typically a cap of about 65,000 visas per year, and since there's so many employers requesting for these visas, it becomes a lottery system. Before Trump's executive order, employers would typically pay around 5 grand in fees to enter this lottery. If you were able to get one of these visas, it would last you about 3 years, and you were able to renew it one more time for another 3 years. So a maximum period of about 6 years. You can even bring in your spouse and any kids under the age of 21 using an H-4 visa. However, there's one big catch with the H-1B visa. You know how I said employers were the ones applying for this visa? Well, that means the visa is tied to your employment status, so if you ever get fired or if you ever want to switch jobs, you can't, or you will be sent back home to the country you came from. And as some of you future multi-billion-dollar CEOs can see, that can be abused, but I'm gonna get back to it in a little bit. So what does Trump's executive order actually do? It increased that initial fee to apply into the lottery from 5 grand to 100 grand. At first, some people were worried that this 100 grand would apply on renewals too, but that's not the case. And some were worried if they had left the country, they would then have to pay 100 grand on re-entry, or their employer would have to pay 100 grand on re-entry, which is also not true. But honestly, that information is kind of hard to find because there are two contradicting points from the administration with two different statements, so it's kind of up in the air right now.
I think, Sean, do you agree with that?
Well, they're $100,000 per year. So the whole idea is no more will these big tech companies or other big companies train foreign workers. They have to pay the government $100,000, then they have to pay the employee. So it's just not economic. If you're going to train somebody, you're going to train one of the recent graduates from one of the great universities across our land. Train Americans, stop bringing in people to take our jobs. That's the policy here, $100,000 a year for H-1B visas, and all of the big companies are on board.
Now you're probably thinking to yourself, how does this affect me as a software engineer? I'm not on an H-1B. And to that I say, the world doesn't revolve around you. But my YouTube channel does, and my daughter needs new shoes, so I'm going to tell you. Out of all applications for H-1B visas, the top 10 employers are all tech companies, and most likely all for software engineering roles. The top 3 are Amazon with 10,000 applications, second, Tata Consulting with 5,500 applications, and Microsoft with 5,100 applications. The H-1B visa is pretty much a software engineering recruiting visa. With rough estimates, there's about 200 to 250,000 software engineers in the US with H-1B visas. To put that into perspective, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics in the US, there are about 1.9 million software developers, quality assurance analysts, and testers in the US. So H-1B visas take up 15% of all software engineering jobs. And I know these estimates are rough, but I just wanted to paint a picture of how much the H-1B actually affects software engineering in the US. And in all honesty, I wouldn't think that's such a bad thing if the economy was good and employers couldn't abuse the system to overwork their employees. But you already know this ain't no fairy tale, and this economy is terrible. Unemployment rates for computer engineering and computer science are skyrocketing. Computer science has hit around 6.1% unemployment, and underemployment is at 16.5%, which means you got a job that doesn't require a computer science degree. I think usually the joke one is barista at Starbucks, but any field that doesn't require computer science. And of course, there have been thousands of layoffs at major tech companies, especially Microsoft and Amazon, which ironically hold the top spots for H-1B visa applications. Now, there has been a lot of talk on Twitter that American, US software engineers are just not good enough for these roles. They are not good enough engineers, and they are not hardworking enough for these jobs, and that's why they needed the H-1B visa applicants instead. But personally, I don't believe that at all. Personally, I've worked with a lot of H-1B engineers. Some were good, some were bad, some were great, some were not great. And it's a mixed bag. Just like from the US, it's a mixed bag. And I didn't see an engineer where I thought, hey, this person is doing a job that no one else can do from the US. But of course, I can't speak for every company. I'm not that great of an engineer myself. I'll be completely honest. That's why I call myself basic dev. And yes, anyone in the comments or on Twitter that is going to hate on me, I cannot make it to Fang. I am not good enough. I give my perspective from a regular engineering perspective, and I work at regular companies, nothing crazy, nothing exceptional, and we have H-1B visas. Most of those visas do go to these companies that are just regular like the ones I work at. But I think that brings up another point, and I'm going to say this, and it might sound crazy, but most software engineering jobs are not that hard. I know, you're gonna burn me at the stake, but hear me out for a second. The majority of tasks, the majority of problems, and the majority of projects are gonna be repetitive ones, are gonna be things that have been solved. How many times have you had to make a new endpoint for a REST API? How many times have you had to adjust a UI screen, or you had to change the color of a button, or add a new element to some front-end system, to some back-end? How many times did you just have to parse some SQL? That's the majority of work at, regular software engineering companies. And that's the majority of work for most software engineers. And in reality, that's the majority of work given to H-1 visa engineers. Even if they're exceptional talents, they are not going to be doing exceptional work. Most companies just need you to learn React and make buttons. But that brings up another point. Why do companies really love this H-1B visa? Why are they defending it so heavily on Twitter, especially Y Combinator ones? Those guys seem to really love the H-1B visa. Well, I'd like to introduce you to Pratik Pandey. He was a 35-year-old Microsoft software engineer that was found dead in the office. His family said he had been working through the night for months at Microsoft. He had told his roommates and colleagues that he was under a lot of stress, juggling multiple projects at the same time. And one tragic night, it was 2 a.m. He had been working late and he had a heart attack. The medical report came out and and he most likely got that heart attack because of all the stress. What would lead someone to work these extreme hours to the point of death? Well, even though there was no direct report of this, looking through Pratik's LinkedIn, you could assume that he was most likely here on an H-1B visa. Since him staying in the US could have been contingent on his employment status at Microsoft, he would need to do every task, complete every job, do whatever his superiors told him to, otherwise he would be fired and deported back to India. Now, in my opinion, this is why tech companies love the H-1B visa. H-1B software engineers are forced to do whatever they're told and forced to work extreme hours. Otherwise, they risk being fired and deported, which would not happen with American software engineers because they would not be deported. They would be less incentivized to work these extreme hours set by tech companies with extreme expectations. And this issue in the US is bipartisan. Bernie Sanders himself had wrote an entire article in January about the problem with the H-1B visa and how it should be reformed and how it should not be abused by tech companies to replace US software engineers with foreign work that they can abuse themselves. Now, will this executive order completely change up the game? Will software engineering be completely different? Now, will the bar finally lower and we'll be able to get our FANG jobs? I'm gonna say probably not. The entire rollout of this executive order has been strange, and it's only been around 3 days, so the future is kind of untold, and really, we don't even know how it's going to be enforced, whether it's going to be enforced. Are there gonna be some kind of bribes by Mark Zuck to make sure Meta's off the list? Who knows? It's a little too soon to tell. Other people have also brought up the point of offshoring. If this H-1B visa change does go through, will everyone just offshore all software engineering jobs? Personally, I don't think the jobs are going to go straight to India or be offshore to India, though I do think another concern is called nearshoring, where you offshore jobs to places like Canada or Mexico with lower cost of living than the US and have lower wages there. However, there are problems there too. Those countries themselves are facing issues with software engineering employment, and they're also facing their own strain with their laws and different changes. So I think it's a little hard to say if offshoring is going to be that big of an impact. I hate to sound like a chud right now, but I don't think anything's going to happen. I feel like this will be overturned, or there will be so many exemptions that nothing really changes, but I might be proven wrong, and I usually am. So if you want to leave a hate comment in the future, make sure you like and subscribe so in a few months from now you can say I was completely off and something actually happened. Thanks for making it all the way through, and thanks for watching.